The letter that changed everything. The air in Longbourn was heavy, thick with an unspoken tension that seemed to vibrate through the walls. Elizabeth Bennet sat alone by the window, her fingers trembling as they traced the edges of the letter she had just received from Mr. Darcy. The early morning sun streamed through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the neat, controlled handwriting in front of her, words that seemed to pulse with an intensity she had never expected from him. She had loathed him once, despised the arrogance that seemed to seep from his every word and action. The man had proposed to her only a few months ago, in a manner so filled with pride that it had stung her to the core. He had insulted her family, her connections, and still believed she would accept him. She had rejected him with all the fire her anger could muster. But now, this letter, it told a different story. "I have struggled in vain," the letter began, and Elizabeth could feel her heart tightening. Darcy had not written this out of pride or superiority. There was something raw here, something she hadn't seen in him before. "I cannot bear it any longer. You must allow me to explain myself." Her eyes skimmed down the page, and the words struck her like a blow. He spoke of Wickham, the charming man who had filled her ears with tales of Darcy's cruelty and injustice. Wickham, who had seemed the perfect gentleman, had turned out to be a liar. Darcy had, in fact, saved his younger sister, Georgiana, from ruin at the hands of Wickham's schemes. Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat as she read of the pain Darcy had endured in silence. He had watched as Wickham spun his lies, tarnishing Darcy's name without ever defending himself. And she had believed every word without question. The truth slammed into her, shattering the comfortable narrative she had built in her mind. Darcy was not the villain she had made him out to be. He had flaws, yes, but beneath the cold exterior was a man of deep honor and emotion, a man who had loved her despite her sharp words and biting rejections. Her heart raced as she recalled the moments they had shared. His eyes, always watching her with a quiet intensity. His voice, deep and controlled but always with a hint of something more. She had ignored it all, too consumed by her own judgments, too blinded by Wickham's lies. Elizabeth closed her eyes, the weight of her own misjudgments crushing her chest. The pride she had once accused Darcy of now felt like her own. She had been too proud to see the truth, too quick to assume the worst of a man who had only ever tried to protect those he loved. But it was the final line of the letter that hit her hardest. "You are too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes are unchanged, but one word from you will silence me on this subject forever." Her breath caught as the meaning of his words sank in. Darcy still loved her. After everything, after her rejection, her harsh words, her complete misunderstanding of who he was, he still loved her. He was giving her the power to end it now, to crush whatever hope remained in his heart, or to open herself to something new, something deeper. Elizabeth felt her pulse quicken. Could she allow herself to admit that her feelings had changed? That the man she had once despised was now the one who had stolen her heart? The intensity of her emotions overwhelmed her, and for a moment she could hardly breathe. She looked out the window, the world outside so peaceful, so unaware of the storm raging inside her. The future loomed before her, uncertain and terrifying. She had always been so sure of herself, so quick to judge, but now, for the first time, she realized that certainty had been her greatest enemy. With a deep breath, Elizabeth rose from her chair. The letter was still clenched in her hand, but the weight of its words had shifted. She wasn't sure what she would say to Mr. Darcy when she saw him again, but one thing was clear. Her heart was no longer the same. The man she had thought she could never love was now the only man she couldn't imagine living without.